Welcome to episode 193 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. Are delivery companies undermining the e-commerce value proposition? Dean Maciuba, Director Consulting Services at Logistics Trends and Insights, joins me to set the cat among the pigeons. Joining me on the line is Dean Maciuba. Dean is Director Consulting Services at Logistics Trends and Insights. Dean, you've set the cat among the pigeons in LinkedIn land, discussing the home delivery, discussing how home delivery fits in with the e-commerce value proposition. This has come out of, well, maybe I'll let you set the scene, Dean. What are you seeing in the USA with regard to what the carriers are doing in home delivery and out of home delivery? And what? Just give us a bit of a snapshot of what you're seeing happen.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Ian. We've seen both UPS and FedEx here in the US open up an incredible amount of retail access points, probably close to 50,000 for each carrier in the past few years. And obviously, when you think of an access point, what you think about is, well, you can have e-commerce shipments delivered there, or you can drop off shipments going out for delivery. What we're seeing, though, is the carriers are aggressively using the access points, and these are usually retail and not parcel lockers, because parcel lockers really haven't caught on here in the US. What the carriers are doing is they're primarily using these access points to redirect deliveries, residential deliveries that can't be delivered for whatever reason. So, Ian, let me tell you why this is important, that the carriers are redirecting shipments to, or non-deliverable shipments to a residence to access points. And the reason is, once you have to make that second or third attempt to a residence, the carrier has lost money on that transaction. They've actually lost a lot of money if they have to go to that residence for a second or third attempt. So what they've been doing is opening all these retail access points, and then very subtly, normally, and sometimes not too subtly, they're redirecting these undeliverable residential shipments to an access point, and they're doing this without customer approval. Now, if a package requires a signature, they're normally not doing that, but most e-commerce shipments are released at the residence so they can deliver them and not have to take them back to their terminal. Also, you need to understand that the carriers put a lot of pressure on their drivers not to bring packages back. And so what you have in some cases is a driver looking for any reason possible, usually justified, but sometimes not necessarily justified, to take a residential delivery to an access point, put a notice on the customer's door, and say, your package is now available at this access point, at this address, from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. And while that is a great service to a lot of e-commerce consumers, it also creates some angst among those consumers because they're really interested in home delivery and they don't want to go to a retail access point, have to park, have to wait in line to get their redirected delivery. So the carriers are aggressively pursuing this strategy. Access points are actually used more here in the US for redirected shipments than direct shipments from a carrier that's been requested by the consumer saying, please send it to this access point because I choose to pick it up there. So while that's absolutely an option and the best way to go for many consumers are also having to deal with the fact that these shipments are being redirected without their permission in many cases, or in most cases.
Of course, Dean, in Australia, what you've just described is perfectly normal. If you've sent a parcel via Australia Post and the recipient isn't at home at that first delivery attempt, it goes back to the local post office for collection. And that's how it has been for, I don't want to say centuries, but a long time. So part of me says, well, if the customer requested home delivery but isn't home to receive it, perhaps they should have selected an alternative delivery option rather than expecting the carrier to make multiple attempts. Just at the risk of going off on another tangent, I remember that in Japan recently, there's been a real issue with multiple delivery attempts to residential addresses, how that clogs up the delivery system, and the issues are associated with that. So, I mean, am I being harsh, Dean, by saying, well, customers should be home to receive it first time, or they should actually choose a different delivery option, put themselves in control?
Ian, I think this goes to the cultural differences across the world between Australia, Asia, the US. Up until recently, UPS and FedEx promised to make 3 delivery attempts. So I think you can see that the e-commerce delivery or overall value proposition was a little bit different here in the US, where there was a focus on getting that packaged delivered. Now, I do want to make a couple of things clear here. Normally, when there's a signature required, they do go back, because if it's signature required, then it's an important shipment and probably not an e-commerce shipment. Maybe it's medications, things along those lines. So while the carriers still will make 3 attempts for shipments that have signature required, they're doing something a lot different now with regards to e-commerce shipments, and they don't want to go back a second or third time, so they're redirecting those shipments. I know that recently, Ian, you've talked about Porch piracy in your podcast. This is another interesting aspect of the redirected delivery. In the past, where a driver might have released a shipment in an area that driver felt may not have been totally secure, if they think that that's the case now, they'll just take it to an access point, which is not necessarily a bad thing at all. But again, what it does, it goes to the changing e-commerce value proposition here in the US, where home delivery is not necessarily the option in terms of availability that it has been in the past. The carriers now charge $4 for a residential delivery, $4 extra. That's another example of the carriers trying to change consumer behavior and have them go ahead and on the front end, when they're checking out with an e-commerce merchant, select access point delivery versus residential delivery.
The residential surcharge, though, that is paid by, in this case, the e-commerce merchant, right? So is the e-commerce merchant passing that on to the consumer, that fee, or would they be using other means to encourage people to use a non-home delivery option?
What's really interesting is the carriers and the merchants haven't been overly aggressive in including the access point delivery option. And that's because this additional fee today is invisible to the consumer. And what's happening is the merchants are building in that added cost to the overall cost of the product. And that's absolutely eating into profit margin for the merchants. Well, with Amazon, we know that Amazon has this ability to subsidize delivery cost. And they really, at this point, don't care how much they're losing on the cost of delivery, because they're building a brand that is totally focused on serving the customer as best as possible. So while it's not an issue for Amazon, I would submit that for other e-commerce merchants, if they have to build the cost into the overall cost of the product, that's hurting them. Now, I do want to add one other thing. These fees are negotiable, these residential charges. So not the larger carriers are not paying $4. However, this type of thing does negatively impact the smaller e-commerce merchant who doesn't have the volume or leverage to negotiate the residential delivery fee down. Also, remember that many zips here in the U.S. qualify for rural delivery fees, and those fees are very close to $4 per package also. So it's conceivable that a consumer who lives in a rural area and is having packages delivered to their house, they're paying $8 or $9 in surcharge, and then you build in the transportation cost.
We've just seen that Lithuanian Post has introduced a new initiative regarding undelivered parcels. If the parcel has a mobile phone number recorded in the addressee section, then that parcel can be redirected immediately to a nearby parcel locker for customer collection. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier on was about one of the inhibitors to the take-up for PUDO collection or collection from an access point is that the customer might have to drive there, find a parking spot, queue up, and all of that, which may or may not be the customer experience or in line with the e-commerce value proposition. If we had a more dense parcel locker network in the US, could we see a situation whereby the carrier could redirect the parcel to a nearby parcel locker, and that therefore means that the customer can access it really easily? They're not going to have to queue; they just have to go to the parcel locker and collect it. I mean, could this be something that spurs the take-up or the installation of parcel lockers in the US?
Absolutely, because you're a subject matter expert on parcel lockers, and what do we know? It's an automated transaction, which people are migrating to automated transactions versus person-to-person transactions. It's available usually 24/7 at a parcel locker, and it's just easier to get in and out of a parking lot and go directly to a parcel locker to retrieve your package. So, yes, it's a problem here in the U.S. that UPS and FedEx have not developed parcel locker networks. Well, why is that the case? It has everything to do with capital cost. It's not uncommon for a carrier here in the U.S. to pay $30,000 for a bank of parcel lockers. And that costs a lot of money. It doesn't cost virtually anything to establish a relationship with an existing retail location. So here in the U.S., the carriers don't want to pay the capital investment required to develop parcel locker networks, but what they do want to do is develop these retail locations, which in my opinion are not nearly as convenient as the parcel locker.
Well, it's kind of a halfway step in some respects. And as we've discussed before, when I've had Marek Krzyzewski from Last Mile Experts on the podcast, we've talked about how you can use these PUDO networks, these access points, to service areas that might have lower volumes of parcels that doesn't justify the installation of a parcel locker, and sort of as a way to evaluate the volumes that are going to a specific area. I guess the other thing that's connected to all of this, though, Dean, is communications with the customer. So if on the day that the parcel is due to be delivered, the customer were informed that the parcel is going to be delivered that day, they're informed that the parcel will be delivered at such and such an hour, that they were able to then have control of their shipment, wouldn't that be an even better situation, that the customer is really able to interact with that delivery, choose? If they said, well, I don't want it sent to that access point, there's one that's on my way home that's more direct for me, rather that, for example, that's got better parking, they know they've got less queues there, or it might be in a shopping centre where they're going to do some other shopping that day on their way home from work, for example. Wouldn't that be an even better solution? And the answer is yes, it would. Therefore, my question is, why isn't that happening?
Okay, so, and this is an unknown, both FedEx and UPS have robust delivery apps. And I believe you call them IDMs usually in Europe, correct?
Well, that's the terminology that a lot of people use there, IDM, Interactive Delivery Management.
Okay, so we don't use that term very much here in the US. We call them delivery apps. And they're primarily designed and promoted to allow the recipient to redirect a shipment while it's in transit. Now, can they work those apps so they can also notify the recipient that the carrier has intentionally redirected shipment for whatever reason? They can be worked that way, but there's not a focus on that aspect of it. The focus is on allowing the consumer to initiate the redirected shipment and then not the carrier to do that and then communicate with the consumer. I'm not saying that's not happening. It's just not a focus for the carriers right now.
What about Amazon? Because if we talk about the e-commerce value proposition and the customer experience and all of that, then Amazon would truly be focusing on the customer. Where does Amazon sit in all of this in terms of failed first-time deliveries, in terms of communications with the customer, and in terms of PUDOs and lockers, just in this sort of under the umbrella of this conversation we're having today?
Okay. As you know, Amazon has been developing a parcel locker network here in the U.S. for many years. Their network just dwarfs the small number of parcel lockers that UPS and FedEx have out there, basically as a test platform. So Amazon is way ahead. But what you see with Amazon is the usage at Amazon is for direct delivery, where when the consumer is checking out on the website, they get the option to have it directly shipped to a parcel locker. In many cases, or most cases, e-commerce merchants here in the US aren't even offering that direct ship option to their customers when they're checking out. Ideally, that's going to grow, and it is growing. And what you have is the carriers going to the merchants and saying, hey, do you want to include this in your service offering at the time of checkout? And if you do, you're going to have to modify your e-commerce platform to support that. So that's good. But there's something else to keep in mind. I really do believe, remember, Amazon does one thing where the carriers are everything to everybody. So Amazon has the ability to focus on e-commerce delivery much better than UPS and FedEx because they're not doing all these other things. That's the only thing they're pretty much doing. So Amazon's focus is still on the best solution for the customer, whether it be direct home delivery or whether it be direct delivery to a parcel locker that's chosen by the consumer at the time that they place their order. So Amazon's perspective on servicing the customer is a little different. They do not redirect undeliverable shipments to a parcel locker. They take it back to the terminal and then they go ahead and make a second delivery attempt. I actually spoke to a delivery service partner, territory owner in the Amazon network. And he confirmed, no, we don't do this. And why would we do this? It would be contrary to what Amazon stands for, and that's providing the best service possible. So what you're seeing, Amazon is simply not redirecting shipments to their parcel lockers, and UPS and FedEx are aggressively redirecting shipments, but they're not going to a parcel locker. They're going to an access point, which potentially is not as friendly as a parcel locker.
So on this theme, though, how much of Amazon's volume is going through its own delivery service partners now, and how much is going through, say, the USPS's Parcel Select product or through UPS? Do you have any? What's the themes or the trends that you're seeing here?
Okay, so by the way, Amazon and the carriers are very close to the vest when it comes to revealing this information. But we know that in December and January, Amazon came out and said that more than half of all their deliveries are being delivered in-house by their delivery service partner network. So Amazon is absolutely taking control of the residential delivery. And we know why they're doing it, because they weren't satisfied with the service provided by primarily the Postal Service, but also FedEx and UPS. So, as a matter of fact, we also know that during the Christmas holiday, Amazon tried to ban their marketplace merchants from who can select their transportation service of choice. They tried to ban them from using FedEx because the claim was that FedEx delivery service wasn't good enough. Well, I don't know if that's actually absolutely true because, Amazon and FedEx are sort of at war and hate each other. So maybe that's Amazon trying to discredit FedEx ground where it's not necessarily true, but the fact remains. Amazon doesn't aggressively redirect packages that can't be delivered to a residence for whatever reason, and FedEx and UPS are doing that.
So if that's Amazon's take on things, is it all about cost when it comes to the carriers like UPS or FedEx or whoever? Is that what's driving this push for out-of-home delivery?
No question, Ian. It's all about cost. And remember, both FedEx and UPS are under extreme pressure to extract cost from their business models because the home delivery is killing them. So if you look at the bigger picture and what drives these publicly traded companies, it's reducing cost and profit margin. And everybody can see that the characteristics of a home delivery are horrible and they drive additional cost. So it's understandable, just from a standpoint of survivability in the marketplace, it's understandable that FedEx and UPS are doing whatever they have to do to reduce the cost of the residential delivery.
Which is probably would have been a good starting off point for us to discuss the merging of FedEx's ground and express networks, but we've run out of time, Dean. So I think we're going to have to save that one for another conversation. Dean Maciuba, Director of Consulting Services at Logistics Trends and Insights. Thanks for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Ian.
That's all for this episode of the Postal Hub podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, and on other podcast platforms. Do you have an email address? Sure you do. Well, go on, sign up for the Postal Hub e-newsletter. It's a weekly email update with the latest podcast and other news. Go to thepostalhub.com and sign up there. Would you like to join my LinkedIn network? Well, you can. But as I say, every week, don't just send me an invitation and hope for the best. Customize that LinkedIn invitation and mention that you're a Postal Hub listener. If you want to throw in a bit of flattery, fine by me. If you want to contact me about anything at all, contact me via email. My email address is ian@thepostalhub.com. I'm Ian Kerr. Thanks for listening in, and I look forward to your company next time on the Postal Hub podcast.